ever really stop to think about, like, what goes into growing the food we eat? Beyond just, farms. It all starts with this amazing but kind of hidden relationship between soil and water.
Right.
And today we'll deep dive into it.
Yeah.
Our guide is this really cool piece called The Vital Connection: Soil, Water, and Agricultural Success.
Okay.
It's from this AgTech company, Farmonaut. They do some really cool stuff.
I've heard of them.
So get ready for some aha moments because we're about to see soil and water in a whole new light.
Definitely. It's easy to overlook the simple stuff.
Totally. Like, we see soil, we think dirt, end of story.
But it's honestly so much more than that. This whole dynamic ecosystem right under our feet.
Okay, so unpack that a bit. What makes soil so fascinating?
Well, think of it like this. It's basically a life support system for plants.
Okay.
This guide, it breaks down how soil's like a giant nutrient supermarket, a water reservoir, even a temperature regulator for those roots down there.
So not just dirt, but this whole environment impacting how plants grow, like an underground city almost.
That's a great way to put it. And just like any city, different neighborhoods, different vibes, soil texture, whether it's sandy, loamy, or clay, it changes how well it holds water.
That makes sense. You wouldn't water a cactus the same as, like, a delicate fern.
Exactly. And then there's this other layer, the guide calls it microbial habitat.
Like the tiny organisms.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about all that stuff living in the soil?
I'll admit, not really. I mean, I know about gut bacteria and all.
It's kind of similar. This microscopic world is key for plants to thrive. It's like having billions of tiny helpers breaking down organic matter, releasing nutrients, improving the soil structure. Nature's underground workforce.
Dirt's way more alive than I thought.
Right.
Okay, speaking of essential ingredients, let's talk water. Obviously, plants need it, but how's it all work?
Imagine water flowing through a plant like its own circulatory system.
Like those time lapses you see of plants growing, but I'm picturing tiny veins carrying all the nutrients now.
Exactly. Water dissolves those nutrients, makes them accessible to the roots, and then it's also vital for photosynthesis.
Right, the whole sunlight to energy thing.
Which water is key for.
Like, plants have internal solar panels, and water makes the energy conversion happen.
Yeah.
So the guide also mentions this field capacity and wilting point. Sounds a tad dramatic, no?
Well, it's about that sweet spot of moisture in the soil, what plants need to be happy. Not too wet.
Not too dry.
Right. Like Goldilocks.
Okay, so field capacity is?
Is when the soil's holding the perfect amount of water, any extra is drained away.
Gotcha.
Wilting point, though, that's when things are getting a bit critical. Soil's at its absolute minimum moisture, plants are struggling.
A constant balancing act, which is where tech comes in, right?
Yeah.
Like Farmonaut, they're all about using tech to help farmers manage this whole soil and water dance.
Exactly. It's really interesting. Instead of just doing things the old way, farmers can get real-time info about soil moisture now.
Wow.
Tech. Farmonaut uses satellites and AI.
Satellites, like, in space?
Yep. They can detect even small changes on Earth's surface, and that tells us about moisture in the soil.
So no more manually checking. Farmers are getting beamed info from space.
Basically, it's like having a team of high-tech scouts reporting on the fields from above.
That's wild. So it just, like, tells them to water, more or less?
Even better, it uses AI to analyze the data and provide customized recommendations for each farmer.
That's some sci-fi stuff. How does that compare to, like, drones or sensors?
That's a great question, and the guide actually has a whole table comparing Farmonaut's system to drones and on-the-ground sensors. So drones, they're great for like really detailed images of a small area,
Right.
but for huge fields, not so efficient. That's where Farmonaut's satellite view wins.
Total bird's eye view of the whole farm constantly.
Exactly. And the AI, it crunches all that data, tells farmers exactly when and where to irrigate.
Saving water, resources. That's amazing. But with all this tech talk, kind of easy to forget, farming's about people too.
It is.
Ever wonder about the farmers themselves using this stuff?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I like this about the guide. It's not just all technical, They have stories about how this tech's making a difference in real farmers' lives.
Yeah, that's what makes it real, right? Not just theory, but actual people growing our food. Any stories stand out to you?
There's one really stuck with me. It was about this farmer struggling with like inconsistent yields. They were using traditional irrigation methods, always kind of guessing. Then they tried Farmonaut's system. Night and day, apparently. Yields went way up. They were saving
Like
water.
giving a crystal ball for their crops. What
Right.
I find fascinating is it's not just selling a product, it's giving farmers tools to make better choices.
For their land
Yeah.
and for how we get our food.
Exactly. The guide does a good job of looking at the big picture, like the need for sustainable farming or the digital divide in rural areas.
Important stuff.
It's good to see a company admitting, tech isn't a magic solution. It's about using it right, making sure everyone benefits.
Couldn't agree more. That's what makes Farmonaut interesting. They get the tech, but they're aiming for a better future for all of us.
And speaking of the future, they mentioned something about blockchain in agriculture.
Yeah. Sounds crazy, almost like science fiction, but the guide explains it really well.
So what, blockchain for tomatoes? How's that work?
It's all about tracking, from farm to table, like a super detailed history of your food.
Huh.
So consumers can see exactly where their food's from, how it was grown, when it was harvested.
That's actually really cool. Builds trust, knowing exactly what you're eating.
Right.
It's kind of mind-blowing, all this tech working together for a better food system. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is. But the guide does a great job. Explains it all clearly, with examples, even some humor thrown in there.
Yeah, it's not a boring tech manual. Speaking of which, gotta say, Farmonaut, great name.
Catchy.
It is. And it makes you think of, like, adventure, pushing boundaries.
Which is what they're doing. It's like they're explorers, but for agriculture, figuring out a more sustainable future.
And they want farmers to be a part of it, which is a powerful message.
Collaboration, that's key.
Oh, speaking of, the guide had a whole section on partnerships, right?
They stress that a lot. Working with governments, researchers, everyone's got to be on board to make sustainable agriculture work.
Makes sense. These are global challenges. No one company can solve it alone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's on all of us to create a food system that actually works long term.
On that note, one thing I haven't heard much about is the economics of all this. Sustainability's great, but it's got to be viable for farmers, too.
Absolutely crucial. And the guide does address that. They argue that this tech can actually boost profits for farmers.
Really?
Yeah, by optimizing everything, less waste, higher yields, it adds up.
So it's doing good A&D, doing good business. I like it.
Exactly. It's an investment, not just a cost.
An investment that benefits everyone, farmers, consumers, the planet. Win, win, win.
Exactly. We have to stop seeing economic health and environmental health as separate things. They're linked.
Well said. It's easy to get overwhelmed by the problems the world's facing, but then you see a company like Farmonaut gives you hope.
I feel that. We do have the smarts, the tech, to build something better.
It's about focusing on those solutions, believing positive change is possible.
100%. Need more of that these days.
It's pretty inspiring seeing how much good tech can do, especially for something as essential as our food.
For sure. And honestly, we're just getting started. The potential for a truly sustainable, fair food system is huge.
Farmonaut's really changing how we think about agriculture, right? Showing that tech can equal positive change.
Absolutely. Blending those old school farming ways with cutting edge tools, proving they work even better together.
They're like the pioneers, paving the way for everyone. And this guides their way of sharing that vision,
Totally. It's a call to action for everyone. Farmers, us eaters, even the bigwigs making decisions. Like they're saying, let's build a food system that actually takes care of us and the planet.
And not just talk, they're actually doing it. I saw on their website they've got tons of resources, info for anyone to learn.
That's great. Shows they're serious about helping people make smart food choices.
It's like they're saying, we're not just selling something, we're part of the solution.
Exactly. That's the leadership we need. Companies stepping up, driving change for the better.
This deep dive's really got me thinking. It's hopeful, seeing how Farmonaut's using tech to tackle these huge challenges we're facing.
Right. Reminds me, we have the brains, the tech, to build something better for ourselves and everyone who comes after.
So, as we wrap up here, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all this talk about soil, water, the future of farming?
Next time you're having a meal, take a second. Think about how that food got to your plate. Appreciate the farmers, the scientists, even the tech. That's all working behind the scenes so we can eat.
Well said. Maybe even go a little further. Look into where your food's coming from, how it's grown. Could be surprising what you find.
Totally. The more we know about our food system, the better choices we can make. It's about aligning our actions with our values,
Love that. Well, that's a wrap on another deep dive, folks. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning. There's a whole world out there to discover.